Just a warning, in this episode of No Filter, we will be touching briefly on the issue of suicide. If you need help, please call Lifeline on 13 11 14.
Thanks for having me in. I'm not tech savvy at all.
I
And when
loved
the thing
what
came
you said.
through,
It just made me laugh.
it would have given me anxiety. I'm hopeless.
I was very
hopeless
honest.
at it.
I find it hard to believe that you couldn't master anything that you chose to tackle. Once upon a time, a single girl and a single guy had sex. So what? That's what you're thinking, right? I've had sex. You've probably had sex. Sure, they were both a little bit famous, but no harm done. Well, wrong. Because despite the fact that the guy left it well behind, for that girl, now a woman, it would go on to define her career and her reputation for the rest of her life. From Mamma Mia, I'm Mia Friedman, and you're listening to No Filter, a weekly interview podcast with people like Candice Warner, who tell their stories very candidly and aren't afraid to be all kinds of vulnerable. Candice Warner used to be called Candice Falzon, and she's an ironwoman. She's also married to Australian cricketer David Warner, and she's the mother of 3 little girls. Most recently, you would have seen her on Channel 7's SAS Australia, where in addition to all the physical challenges she faced, which were hectic, she also went through a lot of this.
A long time ago when I was young, I got myself in a compromising position, which I regret.
What was that situation, number 2?
So it was just a personal situation, too many drinks.
Found yourself in a compromising position.
Absolutely.
That's the easiest way.
Yes, I'd made a mistake, but is that really worth every single day the media trying to drag me down? I don't think so.
Candice, as she's about to tell you, knows what it's like to hit rock bottom. The first time she was there because of that one time she had sex with that guy. And the second time was Cricket Australia's ball tampering incident of 2018. So here to discuss it all is the delightful Candice Warner. Let's talk about rock bottom. Let's start with the bottom.
Yes.
What was rock bottom for you? Do you remember a day or a moment?
Well, I think I've hit rock bottom a few times. So the first time would have been 13 years ago when, I obviously put myself in a bad situation and got crucified pretty badly.
I'm going to defend you there when you say I put myself in a bad situation.
Yes.
I feel like you're shaming yourself a bit. I feel like you might have internalized that. And I just think you were a young single girl with a young single guy.
Yes.
And you did stuff that, you had sex. Gee.
So in 2000, when was it? What are we in now?
2007.
2007. See,
Yeah.
it was the media scrutiny, and I was very thankful that at that time there was no social media, which would have just been horrendous. But I was very thankful for that. At the time I didn't realise so. But yeah, the media and just people were so harsh that when you're so young and dealing with that, with not many life experiences, and your family has never been thrown into the media, it's hard.
How old were you?
I was 22. Yeah, so still old enough that you know what you're doing, but at the same time, when you haven't experienced a lot of life, then you don't know how to deal with certain situations. And it got so bad that I remember pulling to the side of the road and I just can't take anymore. The shame that I had put on my family, the embarrassment that I felt like I had, again, placed upon my family, it was just very hard to deal with. And I can't take it anymore. I can't take it anymore. And there was a part of me that I wanted to end my life. Like, to be brutally honest, I did not want to be here anymore. I did not want my family to suffer. I couldn't just shame my family anymore. So I don't know if I ever would have went through with it, but I think it was that moment that needed to be had to wake me up and go, okay, you can do something about your life and move forward in the direction that you want to go, or you just continue down this path of, I don't know if it's feeling sorry for yourself or just taking the blame and hiding from everyone, from life. I mean, I remember just wearing a hat all the time. My mum was like, you can't wear it. But I just wanted to hide. I wanted to hide all the time. And I was never the type of person that would talk to my parents about things, to talk to anyone. I just kept everything to myself. So that was the first time I hit rock bottom. I got through that, so I knew I was quite resilient.
Defend you?
No.
Because And I'm so sorry. I'm trying to think back of where I was at that time and what I was doing and why I didn't speak out when I watched everything happening, because they say that the only antidote for shame is empathy. And if people feel empathetic towards you, it's kind of like feminism took this big break when we look at like Monica Lewinsky and this whole time that women were shamed and where were we?
Again, I think there was no social media, so
Where was
people
the
didn't have
sisterhood?
that
Yeah,
voice.
right.
There was no avenue for people to speak up and support. And I think even back then, even if there was social media, I think it would have still been really negative. I really don't believe that 13 years ago they had the courage to speak up or to
Mamma Mia would have supported you.
Oh, thank you very much.
I would have supported you. And I'm sorry that I didn't have a voice back then, or I didn't have somewhere to use it, or that I didn't use it, because it's just messed up what happened to you. You did nothing wrong.
So
the grubs that took those photos and exploited you, they did something wrong, but you did nothing wrong.
So that was the first time I hit rock bottom.
Yeah.
So I knew that I was resilient and I could get through it. So, and then the next time I hit rock bottom was obviously in 2018.
To the fans and the lovers of the game who have supported and inspired me on my journey as a cricketer, I want to sincerely apologise for betraying your trust in me.
Coming back from South Africa with my husband and I was pregnant, I have 2 little kids, and having to support my husband through that ordeal. So that was the second time I hit rock bottom, and that was really hard because being pregnant, suffering a miscarriage, but having to put my kids and my husband before myself, it was really hard. I had to be everyone's pillar of strength and their rock. So you do it as a mother willingly, but I had my own struggles at the same time.
I want to ask about the period between those 2 bottoms. At what point did you become defiant and just say, I'm not going to let this narrative own me after 2007? I'm going to change the story. I'm not going to hang my head. I'm not going to wear a hat anymore in public.
I think I was lucky I had sport. Sport gave me a lot of confidence. If I trained hard, it was very, results driven. So if I worked hard, I would get the results through my competition, and through winning events, I gained respect from people, and it gave me a lot of confidence within myself. So I wasn't confident. I didn't want to be seen, but then I really knuckled down, trained really hard, kept out of the limelight, and just thought, no, this is what I'm an ironwoman. This is what I want to do. Ever since I was a little girl, all I've ever wanted to do was make my parents happy, win gold medals, and I just put my head down and I worked really hard. And through that, I gained so much confidence, and I felt like I gained a lot of respect from people again.
How did you meet David?
So I grew up in Maroubra. He grew up in Matraville, so very close. And we always knew of one another just through sport and, that sort of thing, but never knew each other. And it wasn't until I saw – what was it? I saw something on Foxtel. They did a documentary kind of thing on him and his upbringing, and I just thought, wow, what an incredible person. So I reached out to him on Twitter and I just said, I just saw your documentary and it was brilliant.
What was interesting about his upbringing?
Well, David grew up in Housing Commission, so he's had to fight and work hard for everything he's ever had. So for him to reach the heights that he has within Australia and be such a success in India, he's had to go through a lot. When he was able to work, he was maybe 14 and he was working till midnight at Woolies trying to support his family. He's always had his back up against the wall but fought. And I admired that. I admired that he was a fighter and he worked really hard and nothing was ever given to him. So for me, I found that really admirable. So I just reached out and I said that. And
Did you slide into his DMs? Was that a thing back then?
Well, I did slide into his DMs, but it wasn't a thing. I didn't know it was sliding in there. Which
it wasn't called that back then, was it?
Exactly. So, so that's how we started talking, and he had just gone through a little bit of trouble in England with certain events, and we just started chatting and we kind of realised that we needed one another and we supported one another, and together we were strong. But on our own, we couldn't do it. But together we just understood one another and we were a force to reckon with.
How did the relationship progress? Was it quick?
It was really quick, very, very quick, because it was all based on communication. He was in England, I was in Sydney, so we spoke a lot. And through that we got to know each other really well.
Like a proper courtship?
Proper. And that went on for a few months, and then he said, I'd love you to come over to England. And I was like, oh, gosh.
And you'd never met in person before?
No. And I thought, how am I going to get this past my parents? Even though I was, I think, obviously a little bit older.
How old were you?
Oh, I would have been 26, 27. But still, I was living with my parents at the time. And
Are your parents quite conservative?
Yeah, and I respect everything that my parents say. And I'm just going to pop over to England and see this guy that lives around the corner, but I've never met him sort of thing. And it's they're very protective of me. So,
yeah.
And then we just hit it off.
So you did go?
Yeah, absolutely I went.
And what was it like when you first saw
Oh, it was
each other?
amazing. It was incredible. And we still look back at that, and it was the best decision I ever made. And I then came back to Sydney. We moved in together, and then a few months later I was pregnant with our first baby, and it's just been so quick, but it's been so right.
Tell me about pregnancy when you've been a professional athlete for so long. What does that feel like to have no control over your body, which is something that you've mastered for so many years?
It's hard. It's really, really hard. You see, my body's always been my tool, I guess, and you see your body in a certain way. You see it as fit because I need to be fit to be able to perform. I need it to be looking a certain way because that's what I do. Then to have no control of that and you see yourself as you get bigger, I saw myself as getting fat. And I've never been into being super skinny, or that's never been what I've been about. But to see yourself get bigger and you feel yourself getting fat, it's very hard. And mentally I struggled with that. I really did. And with my first, I put on about 28 kilos, which is big, really big. And it wasn't through eating. It was just what happened to my body. And
it's
I
like
struggled.
every woman has a natural weight that pregnancy will find.
And everyone's like, oh, gosh, you must be having a big baby. But in fact, I had really small babies. They were 2.4 kilos, 2.5 kilos. They were tiny, but I was massive.
What about the lack of endorphins? Did you have to, obviously adapt your exercise routine?
So because my babies were so small, I was told you need to stop exercise because they thought that because I was doing this, serious amounts of exercise, that it was affecting my baby's growth. So I pretty much stopped everything. And as you would, you do anything to protect your unborn child. So again, for me, exercise is not just about what it does physically, but it's also what it does to me mentally.
Oh, yeah.
And I need that. I need that break.
Of course.
As being a professional athlete, I just love it.
And the endorphins.
Absolutely. So when they said no more training, no more, just go for a walk, I struggled. I really struggled.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say I got into a depression, but I would look at myself and I wouldn't see that I was carrying a baby. I would just look at an overweight person. And then I've never been maternal. I am now, but at the time I wasn't. So I had Ivy, our first child, and I remember just being really, I don't know if that's the word, but I still had this baby belly. I still
look pregnant, right?
And I didn't know that was going to happen because no one ever tells you. Exactly. No one ever tells you these things. So, yeah, I did struggle with my pregnancies, just looking in the mirror and being confident at the person that I was looking at.
When you were competing, when you're a triathlete, what's the sort of the body image landscape among female triathletes? Is there pressure to look a certain way, or what's the ideal body shape? Is there pressure to be sexy?
So the ideal body shape would be someone that just looks extremely ripped, someone who is very lean but very strong. So that's it. And then you have that, you've got to be sexy. You've got to look that way as well. So you've got to look one way to be strong and to be able to compete at your best. But if you want sponsorship, if you want media attention, you also need to be attractive. You need to, sex sells. That's what they tell you.
Yeah.
So,
and what does that side look like?
Blonde, glamorous, very small swimwear, that sort of thing. That's not comfortable, but you do it,
the sport,
because that's the sport, yes.
How did you feel about your body when you were competing? Was it like a constant bid to master it?
No, I wouldn't say that because we did so much training. I was training 5-6 hours a day. Your body would just form into that. I do remember at one stage though, I slacked off my training and I did put on weight, and my trainer said to me, oh, you need to lose weight, go vegan. And at that time I was like, oh, that's interesting. First of all, that you're telling me that I've put on weight, but in a not a very nice way. And then you're telling me, okay, go vegan. I mean, you don't go vegan to lose weight. It's just so that's where everything was so messed up. And so I did that. And I remember being so iron deficient that I had to have iron injections, 10 injections, so every 3 days. And it's because I did it for the wrong reasons and trying to compete with not having any iron because I didn't know what I was doing. I was young. But you trust your trainers, you trust everything like that. But for me, you train so much, you put your body through so much strenuous exercise that you just form.
Do you think it's a good sport for women?
Yes, I would say so. For me, I love the sport. I've got so many great friends, like lifelong friends. You have the professional side of things, but then you also have the club side of things, which for me, it was all about the club atmosphere, doing things with your friends, the memories that you make. And sometimes back at the clubhouse, they'd have parties at the start of summer, and they're the things you remember. So I think definitely it's a great sport for women.
You said you weren't very maternal before you had Ivy. Did that change? Like, some women don't feel that absolute maternal rush. I know I didn't. Did you?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so before I had my baby, even up until the day she was born, I had nothing. I would never see a child and want to pick them up. I'd never think they were cute. It was just nothing. There was, even when I
Did that make you worry?
No, not really, because I just trusted people say, no, it'll come.
Yeah.
And I remember even shopping for the stuff. I was like, it meant nothing to me buying the pram and putting it together. It was just like, oh, yeah, that's what you do.
You weren't that into it?
Didn't have a baby shower. I wasn't into it. Didn't have the photos, nothing. For me, it was just like, this is what you do to get a baby. But as soon as she came, it was just my whole world was turned upside down, and all of a sudden it wasn't about me. It was about Ivy and my husband and forming a beautiful family that's based on love.
Before you guys got married, did you talk about what it would mean for him to be a professional cricketer and the time that you'd have to spend apart and what it would mean for your career?
So we knew he was already a cricket player. We got together and we had dated a little bit before we had Ivy, so I knew he was away a lot. And I knew that my career would come second, which I was happy to do. I know some people aren't, but I was really happy to leave my career. And I was at that age where at the time Ivy was there, I was 28. He was, I guess, the main breadwinner and doing so well that it was just all about making sure that he was performing and succeeding, and we would come along for the ride.
Did you actually ever have that conversation, or was it just sort of unspoken?
It was just unspoken, but I was happy to do it. I was really happy to do it, and like I'm happy to do it now. He comes first. I mean, family comes first, but his career always comes first because he's still representing his country. He's still got a lot of years left in him, and when he succeeds, I feel like as a family we've done our job.
South Africa, before the ball tampering incident. That sounded like a horrific tour for you and for him.
It was quite unbelievable. So I was just at the cricket and all of a sudden he's walking off, and there was an exchange in between the change rooms where one of the South African players had said something to David about me. Look, I don't think it was he didn't realise the impact that it was going to have, the ramifications, and he said it to try and get under David's skin because at that stage he was, quite a hothead, and Dave was one of the better players, so if I can get under his skin, maybe it'll affect his game. So from that, David retaliated. I wouldn't say he didn't hit him, but there were words, and David got fined for sticking up for me.
David, here in Port Elizabeth, with you having copped a 75% match fee fine and 3 demerit points for your involvement in the Quinton de Kock stairwell stoush. Before we get into it, can you just give us your version of events about what happened that day?
Yeah, look, there was a couple of verbal words exchanged as we were walking off the field, and we were just walking up the stairs, and we're about to get to the change rooms, and I sort of heard someone hissing at me, and I thought it was one of my players, and turned around, and it was Quinny, and from there it basically turned into a bit more of a verbal stoush, and he said something to me that was quite vile and vulgar, and it was derogatory. A comment made about my wife, and it really triggered an emotional reaction, response from myself, and I would never expect a comment that was so disgusting in the close proximity of myself from another player. And I accept, obviously, the charges that have been laid, and I regret the way it was played out, but I'll keep continuing to stand up for my family.
There's been some new CCTV.
Which I don't have an issue with that because he was defending his wife. And I think if he didn't, I probably would have said, hey, he said that. Why didn't you Look, there are different ways to approach situations. Maybe his approach wasn't the right way, but when you grow up in Maroubra or in Matraville, that's just how you deal with things. That's all we know. And I'm not saying it's right, I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's when you only know a certain way to deal with things, that's what he did. But then it wasn't until the next game, I turned up to the game and all of a sudden there were people wearing masks. There was a songbook written about me that was handed around the crowd. And
I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. That sounds
And I'm sitting there with my mum next to me because she travels with us at times and my 2 daughters, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. People were tweeting me, photographing the songbooks, photographing the signs. It was humiliating. It was so hard. And also knowing that my husband was there, seeing all this, hearing all this and trying to perform and play the best that he can for his country. I felt guilt. I felt because of my past, it's affecting his performance. It's affecting the team's performance. But I was embarrassed. I didn't know what to do. The one thing I did know was that I had to keep turning up, keep supporting my husband and showing these gutless people that I'm stronger than they are. But it was one of the hardest things that I've dealt with, to stand and try to watch my husband play cricket and have the cameras on me, people laughing at me, people having signs, singing, chanting songs. It was, if you go to sport, anything in life, but if you go to a sporting match, regardless of your sex, your race, your religion, you should be able to go and watch sport without being mocked, belittled, ridiculed.
And no one did anything to stop it?
No. Actually, the South African officials were having photos with some of the men that were wearing the masks. They later on were sacked from their job.
Good.
But at the time, they obviously didn't have a problem with it.
What was it like back at the hotel that night with you and David? Because you both must have been so distressed.
We just couldn't believe it. And he was in the middle of a test match and representing his country. And for me, again, that was just my main focus, was that he was okay, that he could still perform, that I wasn't affecting the team's performance because of my past. And that's what hurt me the most, because he had these massive goals, these massive ambitions for that test series. And because of my past, it was affecting his performance. That hurt me more than anything.
You're listening to No Filter with me, Mia Friedman, and Candice Warner.
We all woke up this morning shocked and bitterly disappointed by the news from South Africa. It seemed completely beyond belief that the Australian cricket team had been involved in cheating. After all, our cricketers are role models, and cricket is synonymous with fair play. How can our team be engaged in cheating like this?
Tell me when you found out.
Well, the game was on and we always watch to see what's going on in the game, whether we should, is David going to go into bat soon? If he is, we better quickly race to the game, because when you've got kids, you can't sit there all day. And then we saw what happened and we just was like, oh, my goodness. So we were in shock. So we went to the game the next day because it was important to support the team. And then after that test match, which was in Cape Town, I think it happened on the last day or the second last day. So then we all went to Joburg, where the last test match was going to be, and that's when we found out that David wouldn't be playing that game and would be sent home.
So what happened next?
So the 3 boys all had to get home, one to WA, but David and Steve were to go to Sydney and to arrive at different times. So we lucked it out and we got the longest flight home with 2 kids, and I was pregnant. We went by Dubai, stop over in Dubai, and then Dubai, Sydney. We got into Sydney Airport, might have been 10:30 at night. It was really late after having a really long flight, and the media were there.
As you can understand, it's been a tough and emotional time for my wife and the kids. At this present time, you'll hear from me in a couple of days. At the moment, my priority is to get these kids in bed and rest up and let my mind be clear so I can think and talk to you in a couple
The
of days.
flight, I was okay. It wasn't until we touched down and we got the heads up how much media was going to be there, and we got ushered through like the secret way or whatever they call it, and it's when I started to feel like we were criminals, and I just broke down. I just didn't think we deserved to be treated like criminals. And when you've got 2 kids, you're pregnant, and no one knew I was pregnant, and so obviously I was highly emotional. And for my kids to have to just be confronted by the flashes of the cameras and the microphones in our faces as a mother, and all you ever want to do is protect your kids, it was very, very, very difficult.
What did you explain to them?
Well, they were so young. They were 2 and 3. And they kind of used to cameras and stuff, but not to that extent. And they were so tired. We didn't really explain anything to them. What was difficult was that people said that we used our kids as human shields and things like that. And it's like, well, we're parents. What do you want us to do with our kids?
Who should carry them?
Should they walk out on their own and do front the media?
Put them on the baggage carousel.
Because
and
I'm
let them
sure
go round
people
and round.
would have questioned them because they just wanted anything.
And also, if someone else had been holding your kids, then you would have been slammed for that.
Exactly.
Right?
So you can't win. And as parents, our job was just to get them back home, or at the time we went to a hotel because we were renovating our house and we were going to be staying with my mum and dad, and I did not want the media at the front of my mum and dad's home. And every time my mum and dad went in and out of the house, for them to be questioned. It just was, for me, it was about protecting my family, mum and dad as well. So for us, it was best just to go to a hotel.
What was going through your mind in terms of thinking about the future, thinking what's going to happen? Like, where was your mind going?
At the start, I was just thinking about day by day. How am I going to support my husband? How am I going to protect my kids so that they can continue to go dancing, go to school, all that sort of thing.
Were you angry with him?
No, I was just wanting to support him. It wasn't about being angry. It was just about making sure that my husband was okay, that my husband was mentally going to be okay, because he wasn't. But it was my job to make sure that he was okay and that he was getting up in the morning and still having a purpose.
Sounds like you had to park your feelings to be
Yes.
the strong one in the family.
Yeah, so all while doing this, I had my miscarriage, and we kind of just had to just park that, because although it was extremely important, my husband needed me more than I needed me.
Oh, babe.
It was really a really hard time. It's like a big blur, because it was just anything that we did was wrong. Anywhere we went, there was cameras. My poor kids were just always like, why is there this? Why is there that? And we're just, and then having to just try to live without trying to be embarrassed, because people make mistakes, people do things, and we should still be allowed to live as best as we can. It was very challenging, but it did get better. And for us, we just wanted to remain quiet. We just wanted to, for our kids' sake, to just put our head down, work hard, and just continue to be happy parents for our kids, because they needed us. They don't understand. So we still needed to turn up and be mum and dad and smile. And I think they helped us get through that time as well.
It's interesting when you talk about this time and the time in 2007, both times you say, I just wanted to put my head down. We just wanted to put our head down and be quiet. It kind of goes against what a lot of people instinctively do, which is, I just need to explain. Was that something that you attempted to do? I imagine you were getting all kinds of deals and speak to us and we'll pay you this and we'll do that. Who was advising you during this time, or were you both keeping each other's counsel very much?
We were, but we thought, do the opposite to what everyone would expect. Everyone would expect us to be loud. Everyone would expect us to want to tell our side of the story. And we did. We did want to, but it wasn't going to help us. So we needed to go, okay, what is going to help us? And no one really wanted to hear from, well, I mean, there was a lot of interest as to, but what was important was for David to play cricket for Australia again, to gain the public's respect. So in order for him to do that, the best way was just to remain quiet, work hard silently, and when his opportunity came was to strike. And that's what he did.
I've only had one experience where I've crossed sports fans. It was probably the worst trolling pylon I've ever experienced, because Australians take their sport very, very seriously. How did you process that, the feeling of people being so angry at you, a whole country being angry at you?
I think everyone sees the Australian cricket team as their team. They really do. And they've always been so proud of the Australian cricket team. And, yeah, I think that's the best way to explain it is that Australians feel like they own the Australian cricket team. And, I mean, that's a really nice thing.
Until it's not.
Until it's not. And that's why I think there was just so much uproar and because people felt angry. They were upset, like, that you're our team.
Betrayed.
Yeah, and betrayed. Whereas maybe an NRL player or another league doing something, it's
the
more
expectations
common.
aren't as high.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think we just had to deal with that, and it's not right, but it's just the way it is.
How do you process shame? You and David must have learned a lot about shame.
It's just something you learn to deal with. You just know that every day gets better and better, and we are very lucky we have sport because with sport you have redemption. So you have the opportunity to prove yourself wrong. You have the opportunity to score a big score and people go, wow, look how well he's come back. So with sport and because we are in the media, it's a double-edged sword because they can turn on you, but they can also help you as well. So you just have to learn to deal with it, and you know that through hard work and just doing the right thing, people will eventually see that and appreciate it.
So you've got to be patient.
You have to
be patient. There's no quick fix.
There is no quick fix. And I think if at the time, there was massive deals thrown on the table to us, but it wasn't right. What was right was us to be quiet and for David to process everything and play for his country again because that's what he wanted to do more than anything, was to play cricket again.
That's a really calm, smart decision because I imagine you would have been feeling a lot of anxiety financially.
Most definitely. All of a sudden he had no contracts, no sponsors, nothing. And you have kids, we were building a home, we've got bills, you've got everything. So you kind of rob from Peter to pay Paul, that sort of thing. That's what you do, and that's what we did, at times where, you'd max out your credit card or you'd have to withdraw from your credit card. But, this is just what people do. And it was a really good awakening for us because we were living this high for so long and that's not normal. It isn't normal and we're very grateful, but you almost just take it for granted. And when things are taken from you, you realise the value of things, and I think it was a good learning curve for us.
How did you plan for not knowing whether that money was going to come back or not? There must have been some really scary times.
There were.
It's not like he could get a job
No, but he was also fortunate enough because, yes, he wasn't able to play cricket for Australia and his IPL, which is his Indian Premier League deal, had been torn up. He was still able to play cricket in other countries pending if Cricket Australia would allow him to. So he did play cricket in the Caribbean League. He did play cricket in Canada. He just did what he had to do. So it wasn't ideal and the leagues weren't as great as over here, but when you've got a family
and you've got bills to pay,
you do what you've got to do, and that's just what people do. I mean, we're no exception. We're not amazing. That's just what people do. My dad is 76 and just only recently retired because you've got bills to pay. That's just life.
With him away, you'd had a miscarriage. You've got 2 little girls. Were you pregnant again at this stage?
Yes. So at the start, pregnant, and then we suffered another miscarriage. So there was 2 miscarriages in that time, and eventually we fell pregnant, which was amazing. It did take a little while because I think my body was just under so much stress that it just couldn't cope, and everything happens for a reason. But when we did finally fall pregnant, and it was just the most incredible feeling.
Did you always know you wanted 3?
I always wanted 4, but now that I've got 3, I'm like, I do not want another one.
Is the kitchen closed?
Yes, the kitchen's absolutely closed. It's hard work.
How old are your kids now?
6, 4 and 16 months.
And why did you go on SAS? I've been watching you just going, wow. I mean, in many ways you were the most suited person on that show because you clearly, as a triathlete, relish that shit.
I love it.
Oh my God, it's
and in such a sick way. I just love it. And I think being so highly motivated and for so many years having set goals and then the feeling of achievement, and then when you become a mum, You know, it's and
The only goal you can set is that will my kids be alive at the end of the day, so that I can start it all again tomorrow.
And you know, mums and dads, we're all so selfless. And when this came up, it was just the right thing for me that I needed a goal for training, you know, for that, but also something for me. And I think every mother, we don't do enough for ourselves. We're so selfless. It's all about the family, and that's great. And I love doing that, but it was time to do something for me.
For identity.
For identity, and just to achieve something again, to know that I'm capable, more capable than just the sandwich and wiping my daughter's bottom and mum and I needed that. And I feel like what I've learned from that is I'm so much more resilient and tougher, and there's so much more to me than just being a mum, because you do get lost in being a mum at times.
Yeah, that's so true. And I guess that's probably the one downside a downside of deciding to be the primary carer and holding the fort and being the CEO of the family means that your life and your identity is molded around everyone around you.
I really like that, the CEO of the family. I'm going to tell Dave that.
You are the CEO of the family.
But you're absolutely right.
Particularly when he's away all the time. And, you know, I imagine with his life comes a lot of extra stuff.
Yes.
He's in the public eye, you're in the public eye, and you've got the kids. But being in the public eye doesn't mean you don't have to wipe the bottoms and make the lunches and
so
read the
many
stories.
People think that we've got nannies and we don't. I do it on my own, and I have my mum that helps me, and my brother lives with us and he helps. You know, we're just a very tight family unit, and that's the way I like it.
You must have known, you know, you're smart. I imagine you get invited to be on reality shows often.
Yes.
You must have known, they were very explicit in this one about how we're going to mentally break you, and you would have known what the storyline was going to be around you. You would have known that they wanted the stuff about David, the stuff about your past.
Yes.
How did you make the decision to do it anyway?
Because that didn't worry me. I felt like what I would gain from this from a personal level and for my growth was going to far outweigh anything that I could say. And you didn't worry about being exploited for that. I was so impressed watching that episode where they had to think, and it was like, okay, here we go. And they've got a clever sort of device where they have the SAS guys reading the headlines about all the various people. Not for everyone. Not for everyone.
Oh,
Only I think myself and Chappelle had that.
Okay.
Yes.
I didn't watch the whole thing. Well, I suppose Chappelle, and not even for Honey Badger.
No.
What I thought was incredible and shouldn't surprise me at all about you is how you were very clear. You drew a line and they tried to draw you in on it and what happened in your past and what did you do that you regret. And you were very clear and they backed down.
Yes. And again, it happened last night in last night's episode. And
what happened? I haven't seen
last night
episode.
they got us all in a room and
a truth circle, was that
yes,
that?
And tell everyone your biggest regret in life. And the funny thing was everyone had their turn, but when it came my turn, the head DS, Ant Middleton, came and sat next to me and questioned me and interrogated me again when no one else had that. So it was very clear. It was very, very clear to me after that what they were trying to achieve. And I got quite angry. Because I knew that, hang on a second, no one else was getting interrogated then. I felt like that one exercise was designed for me. I think they thought that I was going to slip up and by that give them more. But I still kept my wits about me no matter how tired I was, however much I was missing my family, because it's important in life to keep your wits about you. And I was really quite angry after that because I thought, hang on, this is – for a show that's not produced at all, I felt like that's when, hang on, this is starting to get a bit produced for me and I was disappointed.
Yeah, I could tell that that's where they were going and that's why I only saw the first one. I was so stoked when you just went, no.
Yes.
And they respected that.
Yes,
they backed
did.
down.
And he was getting quite aggressive and quite, very in my face.
Yeah.
And of course I was going to be aggressive back because it's like, how do you deal with that? Yeah, I've never been in that position. So, but I knew what I wanted to say, what my message was going to be, and no matter how much poking and prodding, I drew a line in the sand.
You learn a lot about the people around you when you go through tough times. What have you learned? You know, what's disappointed you and what's surprised you in a good way?
Yeah, it's very, very true. And you realise who your true friends are, that's for sure. A lot of people just there's no more tickets for the cricket anymore, or they're embarrassed, so you don't hear from them, which is probably a good thing because, like I said, when you hit rock bottom, you can reassess your whole life. You go, okay, well, I don't need you in my life anymore. You don't contribute. You don't add any value to us as a family. So we found out who our true friends were, who really loved us for who we were, not for being David Warner, the cricket player. It was being just David Warner. So that was really nice. And I think that's a really nice thing to do because so many times in life, and especially with social media, you've got friends. How many friends have you got, or followers or whatever? But they're not friends. You don't know them, and they're so insignificant. So for us, we got to assess who were truly our friends, and it was really, really refreshing.
What are you going to do next?
Oh, I would love to say I'd love to do this, I'd love to do that, but with cricket, and David's career, he comes first, and it's very hard to hold anything down or put myself forward for too many things because we don't know if we're going to be here, or I can't do anything too regular because usually we're on the road a lot. So next for me is just supporting David and trying to have a nice Christmas together. We haven't seen him for 4 months, and we will be seeing each
4 months.
Yes. So we get to see each other next week once he's out of hotel quarantine. So we're really looking forward to that.
I hope that you embrace your identity as CEO of the family.
I really appreciate that.
And think about it like that.
Yes.
Because what you do is amazing.
Thank you. I really do appreciate it. And through this show, I've had so much support, so much more than I thought I would ever have. And I haven't been able to get back to everyone yet, but I will because I've been blown away, and people telling me their stories and people opening up. And I'm so glad that I've done the show for people to be able to, for them to have a voice as well.
You're an incredibly impressive woman.
Oh, thank you. I really do appreciate it. I do.
I reckon that is one of the best interviews I've ever done, not because of me, but because of Candice. She's so grounded. Often you'll have people who've gone through difficult things and they'll talk about it, but they'll get a little bit lost in the telling. And then you have people who don't want to talk about difficult things. And Candice was neither of those things. She was, as you heard, so incredibly vulnerable and honest, but she was also very grounded and very unapologetic. You can hear that she still carries a lot of shame. I think it's because the media keeps piling that shame on her. But as we said, the only way to eliminate shame is with empathy. And I have so much empathy for what Candice has been through, and I hope you do too. Oh, and before we go, I wanted to let you know that Mamma Mia has a new podcast. It's called The Undone, speaking of candid and vulnerable, and it's all about navigating life in your 20s. It's hosted by Lucy and Emily, who both work here at Mamma Mia, and they also live together. They spend their days getting tattoos, trying to work out how to turn the oven on. Actually, only one of them has tattoos and she only got them this week. So it's not like what they kind of do every weekend. And what they also do is a lot of dating. They're both single and according to them, their dating lives are garbage fires. It's such a funny podcast, listening to them tell their stories and just remembering for me what it's like to be in your 20s and remembering why sometimes their tiny little daily struggles seem just so insurmountable to them. You can listen to the first episode now wherever you get your podcasts. It's called The Undone. And this episode of No Filter was produced by Leah Porges and Zoe Ferguson. And the executive producer of No Filter is Elissa Ratliff. I'm Mia Friedman, and I'll see you on mamamia.com.au.